for the movie Poison. So
hi everyone, welcome back to our episode of SCV Law and Life podcast. I'm your host Mason Roshtian, personal injury attorney and founder of the Mason Law Firm right here in Santa Clarita. Today we have a special guest with us, William Marler from Marler Clark. He has been litigating foodborne illness cases since probably forever. He's been.
I'm not that old.
No, I don't mean it that way, but I know in 1993 was your the case that really started put you on the national level, which was the coli bacteria outbreak with Jack in the Box. I'm sure you did that before too, but I'm just not sure how much further before that you did that. But
no, that was it. I was only 10 years old. So
well, he's the nation's most well-known attorney as far as foodborne illness litigation goes. He also has worked, I know, in Congress as far as to try to help with food policies and making sure our food is safe out there for everybody. So I'm really happy to see him here, and I'm really glad. And I have to admit, I've been an attorney for 28 years. I usually don't look at somebody and go, I'm in awe. With Bill, I am, because he's one of those attorneys who really is out there trying to help everybody. And he is a really good guy. So, hi, Bill.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. So, I want to ask you about what's going on with the listeria outbreaks as far as the pasta goes right now. But before we do that, let's talk about your background a little bit so people can get to know who you are. And
sure,
we'll go from there. Can you give us about 2-minute introduction?
Yeah. So I did start litigating food cases in 1993 in the Jack in the Box E. coli outbreak, which actually started in California and sort of moved around the Western United States. Ultimately, there were nearly 700 people sickened, 4 kids died, and about 75 children suffered acute kidney failure. So it was a really significant outbreak. The litigation went on for a long period of time. We found that the company was undercooking the hamburgers. Once that was sort of found in discovery, the cases really started to resolve. And then after that, I worked really hard to push to have E. coli deemed an adulterant in a hamburger, which made it illegal to sell hamburger with E. coli in it, which required people to test. There were lots of recalls in the 90s. And, nowadays, I never have, or very rarely have, an E. coli case linked to hamburger. So, both the litigation was successful to push companies to do the right thing. But then, the legislation that we were able to get done, really, in many respects, put me out of the meat business. And so, but there's been a lot of people who've been saved, a lot of kids who've not died, and a lot of kids who've not suffered kidney failure. And, so, it's that kind of thing where, we as lawyers can do good things every now and again.
Well, yeah. So what are the main pathogens that you deal with when it comes to foodborne illnesses?
Yeah, I mean, so it's kind of changed over the 30 years a bit. 30 years ago, it was a lot of E. coli cases linked to hamburger. That's pretty much kind of disappeared, thankfully. But we're seeing a lot of E. coli in ready-to-eat leafy greens. Romaine lettuce has been an ongoing problem, unfortunately, and still is. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of work that we still have to do there, environmental contamination. But, we're starting to see a lot more listeria outbreaks linked to ready-to-eat products, ones that are already ready to be prepared for us or ones that we prepare ourselves. Shigella, it's a fecal pathogen that can be spread person to person. And then, of course, Salmonella, Campylobacter, those two bugs sicken 2.6 million Americans every year, and half of them are linked to chicken. And chicken is completely legal to be sold. And I think most people listening to this will be going, no, that can't be. But producers, grocery stores can knowingly sell E. coli or salmonella and Campylobacter tainted chicken because the government has refused everything we've ever tried to get done to ban those pathogens from chicken. So about half of those 2.6 million cases come from chicken.
Wow.
So we have more work to do.
So how does one protect themselves in these days as far as to make sure everything is safe?
Yeah. So, I think one of the things that's kind of important to understand is, the people who are most severely injured are, the very young, the older folks. I've put myself in that category, the over 65 folks now, people who are immune compromised, that they're recovering from cancer or they're, are on steroids for one reason or another. And then also pregnant women, all those categories of people, which make up a lot of us, are the most vulnerable to foodborne pathogens. The things you can do to protect yourself, and I get that question asked all the time. It's that, I'm not a organic foodie guy. I probably, eat as kind of as regular as most people. But, the one things that I sort of focus on is being able to control, what we consume, that, you're not leaving it up to completely convenience. Yeah. It's really great if people cut your apples up for you and cut your lettuce up for you and cut your fruits and vegetables up for you. But, that just enters another potential problem where, things can become contaminated. I always tell the story there was a spinach outbreak in 2006. 205 people got sick. 5 of those people died. A bunch of kids, adult women, because adult women eat a lot of spinach. That we were able to link that outbreak to one 20-acre farm in San Juan Bautista, California. And all of the 20 acres was processed on one day. It was cut and processed on one day. There had been some wild pig intrusions in the field. And, the wild pigs didn't do their business on all 20 acres. They did it here, there, and everywhere. But when you process it all on the same day, you put it in a facility, you triple wash it, you put it in bags and ship it across the country, you're just asking for a problem. Had you just cut that spinach the way we used to see spinach in grocery stores in a bunch, would there have been a couple people sick? Maybe there would have been, but it would have been 1 or 2, not 205. So, I wrote an article like, is convenience worth the risk? And I think, people just need to kind of take a little bit of control themselves, cook things thoroughly, wash things thoroughly, pay attention to cross-contamination. If you go out to dinner, realize that there's somebody else, are they doing what you would do at home? And I have a tendency, instead of like ordering a salad, I'll order, cooked vegetables. Or, I have to admit, I probably piss a lot of, chefs off when I order things well done. But again, it's just kind of being in this business for 32 years.
Yeah.
I see where the risks are.
And of course, you and I know each other from a local outbreak out in Santa Clarita. That's where I met you, with a Mexican restaurant out here. I'm glad that's finally coming to fruition and closing. The restaurant is back open, but the case is finally resolving.
These outbreaks happen, and I always tell people that usually there's like it's not like they had knowledge of a problem and then continued to operate. That's not really what happened here. But it appeared from the, all the reports that we had was that there was likely some cross-contamination, some ill employees. It was, an accident waiting to happen. Not that it was intentional, but, I think it underscores just how important, paying attention to details when you're in a restaurant setting or your manufacturing setting. and realize that the people who are coming to your, facility to eat, or they're buying your product from a grocery store or a deli, they're relying on you to, treat them like, you would want to be treated in your own home. And so I think it's just it's a good warning for restaurants and grocery stores around the country.
So what are the symptoms that people usually get when you come sick?
So, not to get into the gory details, but I think there's a couple of things that I think are kind of interesting. I would say that almost everyone who calls me thinks that it was the last thing that they ate that made them sick. And it's usually not. Salmonella has an incubation period of 12 to 72 hours, but it can be up to 5 days. Hepatitis A has an incubation period of 2 to 5 weeks. And so, between ingestion and onset of illness, it's 2 to 5 weeks after you were exposed. Listeria, which we started talking about earlier, has a crazy incubation period. It's 3 to 70 days. That's 70. Oh. And so, each of these pathogens have different incubation periods. Many of them have similar symptoms, but some of them don't. And I'll give you an example. E. coli that you hear about in the news, E. coli 0157, has a kind of a classic 3 to 4 day incubation period and diarrhea that turns bloody. If it turns bloody, it's likely an E. coli case. Although Shigella, which is another Shiga toxin producing bacteria, can also have bloody diarrhea. Less usually for Salmonella, and usually it's, vomiting, diarrhea, exactly what you'd expect in a foodborne illness case. Hepatitis A, it's jaundice, liver pain, and Listeria gets in your bloodstream, can get in your spinal fluid and cause brain injury. So, each of these pathogens kind of have their own thing, own incubation period. And so from not only from a victim's perspective, getting prompt medical attention is the right thing to do, getting a stool culture, a blood culture, but also, from a lawyer doing the investigation, trying to figure these cases out, knowing what the pathogen is helps you be able to triangulate back on what the likely problem is. As an example, if I got a Campylobacter Salmonella case in my office and, 2 days before the onset of their illness, they ate chicken at, a restaurant and noticed that it was undercooked, it's a pretty good chance that that's where they picked it up, So, that's the important part about, like E. coli, if somebody ate romaine lettuce, 3 days before their onset of the illness, it's probably romaine lettuce. But there's a lot of investigation that goes into this, especially if the outbreaks are smaller. The smaller the outbreak, the smaller the number of people sick, and the harder it is to figure out the outbreak. In the Madre case, there unfortunately were so many people sickened, it wasn't rocket science to figure out that the restaurant was the source of the problem.
Yeah. So am I correct that one of the best things you should do if you think you may have a full-blown illness, just go to the urgent care, go to the emergency room, get a stool sample done right away?
Yep. That's, I mean, there's, not only is it a good practice because, especially if you're dehydrated, I'm not sure that everybody who gets a tummy ache should go to the ER. I mean, if you're sick enough that you're dehydrated, you can't keep fluids down, you've got a high fever, absolutely you should go. Getting a stool culture or sometimes a blood culture, depending upon the pathogen, will tell the physician a lot about what kind of treatment you should get. As an example, the type of E. coli that you hear about in the news, it's called E. coli 0157H7. That pathogen is antibiotic resistant. And in fact, it is really, you should not get antibiotics because it can make the problem worse. So knowing you got a stool culture that's positive for E. coli will tell the doctor no antibiotics. However, if it's positive for salmonella, they can be treated by antibiotics. So knowing that's going to be helpful. And then, also knowing that if the person wants to figure out and make a claim against the restaurant or the product, having that information about the type of pathogen it is really super helpful.
Got it. So let's talk about this listeria outbreak. What's going on? I know it's
pasta, right? Unfortunately, it's pasta, and it's a pasta company from California called Nate's. There's so far, and I unfortunately think the outbreak is going to get bigger. There's 27 people sickened, in over a dozen states. There unfortunately has been 6 confirmed deaths and a fetal loss. And so, it is apparently they've been able, and they actually have not only. I can get you into the weeds on genetic fingerprinting, but I'll sort of stop and explain that. So after 9/11, the Bush administration was incredibly worried about bioterrorism. So they dumped billions and billions and billions of dollars into whole genome sequencers and provided those to health departments all over the country. And those whole genome sequencers, what they do is they actually extract the full genome of that bacteria out, and they can compare that whole genome to other people, the listeria that's found in their body. So what we know about these 27 people is they all have the exact same whole genome sequence listeria that was found in their bodies, in their blood or spinal fluid. And then we know that they also were able to find that whole genome sequence in the pasta products and then eventually in the pasta itself. And so it's completely, unassailable scientifically that these people are all connected, and they're connected to consuming contaminated pasta. That pasta was produced, and then it went to other manufacturers who used the pasta to put in a variety of things, from marinara sauce pasta to shrimp scampi. It was all sorts of things where that pasta went. And it frankly made it a little bit problematic to try to figure it out. But what worries me a lot is that a bunch of the cases that they found recently are all in the first couple 2-3 weeks of October, and usually the counting of these illnesses usually lags a couple of weeks, and now we don't have anybody at the FDA and CDC counting the bodies, so to speak. So I think, unfortunately, these numbers are going to go up, but we may not learn about it until after the government reopens.
Yeah, and you said the incubation period could be up to 70 days for listeria, right? So it's going to be even worse. Yeah. So how does somebody find out if they should get rid of their pasta? Is there a way to find that out?
So the FDA website has, if you Google FDA pasta recall, there's a fairly comprehensive list with photographs of what the product is. But the bottom line is, if you purchased pasta in that frozen pasta product, over the last several months, and you got it in your freezer, there's a good adage in the sort of the food safety space is, when in doubt, throw it out. And, I'm not a big fan of throwing things out just for the heck of it, because especially with the SNAP program being eliminated, people are probably hungry. But, what you don't want to, sorry.
It's okay.
What you don't want to see happen is, trying to cook the listeria out of the product. That's not going to be a safe way to deal with it. So, if you look on the website and that product's there, take it back to the store for a refund. If you can't find it and you just aren't sure, and you got that kind of product in your freezer, just throw it away anyway. It's just not worth the risk.
How do people get a hold of you if they unfortunately are sick because they got
Yeah,
food
I mean,
poisoning?
unfortunately, I'm pretty easy to find. If you just Google Bill Marler, it'll either pop onto my website, or it might pop up the documentary "Poisoned" by
Mhm.
the Dirty Truth About Your Food that came out a couple years ago, based on a book about the Jack in the Box case that I did, and interestingly. The movie just won an Emmy about 6 months ago, which is kind of cool.
Oh.
So
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the documentary series. Okay, so that's what it was.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So a guy wrote a book called Poison about the Jack in the Box case, and just because I wound up being kind of the lead lawyer in that case, and the story kind of lended itself to how a lawsuit pans out from the beginning to the end, and he put a lot in there about interviews with Jack in the Box people and victims and lawyers and stuff. But I sort of was the through line in the book. And then just before COVID, Netflix picked up the movie rights and decided to do it as a documentary. And so the first, quarter of the documentary is about the Jack in the Box case, but then it basically follows foodborne illness outbreaks and the work that I've done with legislation over the course of the last 30 years. And so partly it's a movie that should scare people. Partly there's parts of it that are, give a lot of hope that we can, work together and, continue to make some progress. And I think the only thing about the movie I didn't like was they had a bunch of video of me from 32 years ago. And my kids were like, geez, what happened to you, Dad? So that was pretty fun.
We
So
all have that, trust me. And I
yeah,
know you have blogs out there. I know you have a lot of stuff going on. As a matter of fact, I was talking to my sister-in-law earlier this morning. She is a professor of psychology in a few of the colleges out here. And I mentioned your name. She goes, oh my God, I use Bill in my studies all the time. I quote his studies that he does
wow.
because of how to, for reproductive stuff, how
Yep.
people should take care of themselves. So she knows who you are. She
Ah,
quotes you all the time. So
wow. Well, say hi to her for me.
I
So
will. So what's the one case that really has stuck with you? Is it the Jack in the Box case? Or would it be a different one?
that's hard to say. It really is. You do this work long enough. Uh, you're just sitting here thinking about it. I remember, I've been in one too many, ICUs when a kid has died. I've sat across the table for parents whose children have died or needed a kidney transplant. You know, I, you know, I had a listeria outbreak I dealt with about 15 years ago. It was 33 people died. I represented the families of all of those folks, and a whole bunch of them were World War II and Korean War vets. Some with Purple Hearts, who survived, Iwo Jima or the, German theater, and, wound up eating a cantaloupe and dying. And so those things sort of stick with you. And, that's probably why I do spend a lot more time, less as a lawyer and more as a food safety advocate, because, I really am tired of sort of seeing those folks. And, I do a lot of speaking around the world on food safety. I did a speech a night ago, 5:00 p.m. Pacific time was 9 a.m. Beijing time at a food safety conference in Beijing. And the following morning, I was doing a speech in Norway by Zoom. So,
Wow.
yeah, and I'm working on a listeriosis case that sickened 1,000 people, killed 200 children in South Africa. I'm helping a law firm down there sort of stand up and figure out how to, do something for those victims. So, yeah, I'm pretty passionate about what I do. I'm just turned 68, and it's hard to realize how fast this has gone. But, I still love the work I do. I still get excited about coming to work. Not always loving the defense counsel on the other side, but, it's, I love representing these victims. I love doing the work, both as a lawyer and an advocate.
Well, thank you for all you do, both
Yeah.
on the victim side and on the advocacy side, because I know it's difficult to do.
Yeah.
So at home, what can we do to make sure we're being more safe as far as food preparation goes?
Yeah. So there's a really good part in the movie, and it's all about cross-contamination. And I think that, it's not, we're human and we're not perfect. And, but, there are things that you can do to, protect yourself. You can wash your hands thoroughly. You can wash your cutting boards and your countertops. You can use a meat thermometer to cook, food. You can keep hot things hot and cold things cold. You don't need to necessarily buy cheese and keep it in your refrigerator for 6 months. There are things you can do to, protect yourself and your family, but a lot of it has to do with kind of common sense. Washing your fruits and vegetables thoroughly. You don't have to use bleach, just under good cold running water. Keep your meats separate from, ready to eat products like lettuce or celery. And again, washing things thoroughly, cooking things thoroughly, and, keeping, potentially pathogen products separate from products that are ready to eat. And usually can do okay. So
I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it. We do a lot of pre-made salad in bags. I suspect that's probably not a good thing to do.
Yeah. I know the bag salad people probably have a pinata up of me that they beat on all the time because I say this. But, in 20 plus years of litigating leafy green outbreaks and E. coli, 90% of those cases are linked to triple washed, bagged, pre-prepared chopped salad.
Oh boy.
And no, it's like I know I ruin everybody's meals eventually. And but and I've caught I've caught my family buying boxed salad. I'm like, what the, what are you doing? And so, but then on the other hand, I've gone out to dinner at a fancy restaurant with my wife and she'll order oysters. I'm like, really? You just
Trump says you gotta live once in a while, right?
Yeah, you're mocking me. Come on. So, but it's, I think a lot of common sense, but, I think keeping things simple and just realizing it's a pain to cut up your carrots yourself,
right.
But, buying it from, pre-washed, pre-cut, all that stuff, there's risk of listeria. And listeria is a really nasty bug, by the way. It's second only to botulism in its death rate. About a third of the people that are impacted, 25 to 30% of the people impacted from listeria will die. And so, and where do you find listeria tainted products? You find it, in your deli case, in pre-made salads, in pre-cut fruit, in pre-cut vegetables, things that are, manufactured for you for your convenience. Certainly is convenient, but especially if it's a product that isn't cooked or that you might undercook, the risk of listeria to me is just high enough. It's just not worth it.
When in doubt, throw it out.
Yep.
All right. I'm going to go home today and with my wife, I'm going to clean out my fridge because trust me, like those triple wash greens I use for my smoothie every morning. That's a bad idea. Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just buy a head of lettuce.
Yeah. I'm going to have to do that from now on.
just wash it yourself. You'll be fine. So,
All right. Now that you
all right.
scared us.
I
All
know.
right. So
It was funny. I'll tell you a funny story. My wife is wonderful, great. Everybody loves my wife. And I was, we'd been married for, I don't know, 10 or 15 years. And I was like, how come these people never, like, we've had them over for dinner a whole bunch of times. So how come they never invite us over? And they're like, they're afraid to feed you. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do? Sue them? They're just like, no, they're afraid. They're just afraid. They're just freaks them out. So they don't invite us. And I'm like, oh, well, I guess that's sorry.
I can see that. I mean, look, I do obviously all sorts of litigation cases, right? Whenever I go to a hotel or anywhere else, I can't help but think, okay, that's a safety hazard. That's a safety hazard. So that's probably what it is. Yeah.
If you want to get over that, go to Australia, because their whole viewpoint on safety is completely different. If you go to Australia, you'll be on a cliff and there'll be no warnings, there'll be no signs, there'll be no fences. And I remember going there for a couple of months I gave a bunch of lectures on food safety. And by the end of my months there, I was with my wife and kids and we traveled all over. But, I found out how many of their snakes can kill you, cone snails can kill you, how many other things can kill you. Yeah. And at the end of the day, I was like, all these things can kill you. Why would you even care about food safety? And I think, one of the things is that, we in the United States really look for safety and really expect it. And that's not a bad thing. But yeah, if you want to get over being afraid of things, go to Australia for a couple months and then everything will kill you.
Yeah, I know the spiders.
So, yeah.
All right. So one more time, how can people get a hold of you before we?
Just marlerblog.com. I'm easy to find and, happy to help, happy to answer any questions I can.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being our guest today.
You bet. My pleasure.
Yeah. If I've got anybody who unfortunately is sick, trust me, we'll send them your way because I know you work all around the country.
Happy to work with you. So it's great.
Okay.
All right.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us for this episode of the SCV Law and Law Podcast. If you like this episode, please like us, and you can see other episodes on YouTube. Thank you so much.